She used to wake up before the sun. Back when mornings still had meaning and the world felt alive with the rhythm of her family's laughter echoing down the hallway. Now, the silence that filled her small house was so thick it almost hummed. A quiet that pressed on her chest until she could feel every beat of her tired heart. Her name was Margaret Hayes, 79 years old. Widowed for nearly a decade, her once busy home now an echo of what it used to be. Walls still hung with family photographs that had long since stopped reflecting real connection. Each morning she shuffled to the kitchen, her worn slippers brushing against the faded linoleum, setting the kettle on the stove just as she had done for 50 years. Though now there was no one to share the tea with. She still set 2 cups out of habit. One for herself, one for her late husband, Richard, because pretending for a moment that he might walk in and smile made the emptiness a little more bearable. Her children, Emily, Paul, and Sarah, had once promised to visit often, but promises had a way of fading with time, swallowed by their busy lives, their own families, their endless distractions. At first the calls had come weekly, then monthly, then only on birthdays, until even those became text messages sent by assistants or forgotten altogether. Margaret never complained. She understood the way life pulls people in different directions. Still, there were nights she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how something as fierce as a mother's love could fade into memory in the eyes of her children. She kept a small notebook on her bedside table, not for writing poetry or grocery lists, but for keeping track of when they last called, what they said, and how long the conversation lasted. 3 minutes from Paul on Christmas Eve, 7 from Emily after her surgery, none from Sarah since spring. Each date written carefully, each silence heavier than the last. Outside her window the seasons changed. Summer light turned to autumn gold. Autumn gave way to the soft hush of winter. But inside her world nothing changed except the dust gathering on framed photographs and the slow bend of her shoulders. One cold afternoon in February, Margaret walked to the corner market, a small grocery just 4 blocks away. Her knees ached with each step, her breath forming tiny clouds in the air. She carried her old leather purse, the one Richard had given her on their 40th anniversary. And inside was a carefully folded list, bread, milk, and her favorite tea biscuits. At the checkout, her hands trembled as she reached for her wallet, the coins slipping from her fingers and rolling under the counter. "It's all right, ma'am, I got it," said a voice, warm, young, patient. She looked up and saw a boy no older than 19, wearing a delivery uniform, his brown hair messy, his smile kind. His name tag read Eli. He bent down, picked up the coins, and gently placed them in her hand. "Heavy bag for you," he said softly. "Let me walk you home." Margaret hesitated. Pride still lived somewhere deep inside her, but the kindness in his tone melted her resistance. They walked slowly down the street together, Eli carrying the bag as if it weighed nothing. He asked her about her day, about her favorite tea, about her family. She spoke carefully, her voice thin and quivering, afraid to reveal how empty her days had become. When they reached her doorstep, he smiled again and said, "Next time call me, I deliver for the store. I'll bring whatever you need." She nodded politely, assuming she'd never see him again. But the next morning, there was a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, there stood Eli, holding a small paper bag. "Forgot to give you your receipt," he said with a grin, though she suspected he had come just to check on her. From that day on, he stopped by every few days, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to talk. He fixed the loose hinge on her door, helped her reconnect the old radio, and even cleaned the snow from her walkway. She began to look forward to the sound of his footsteps, the gentle knock that reminded her she wasn't invisible. Over tea, she told him stories about her youth, how she met Richard at a dance hall in 1962, how they'd built this very house with their own hands, how the children used to play hide and seek in the backyard. Eli listened, really listened, with eyes full of curiosity and heart full of warmth. He called her Miss Margaret, but soon started saying Grandma M, and she smiled every time he did. As weeks turned into months, the boy became part of her world. He brought her flowers on Sundays, not expensive ones, just daisies from a nearby field. He taught her how to use the new phone the store had given her, and helped her create a playlist of old songs from the 1950s. They'd sit together listening to Sinatra, her eyes glistening as she mouthed the lyrics. "You remind me of my grandmother," he once told her quietly. "She raised me till she passed." You have her smile. Margaret's throat tightened at those words. And though she didn't say it aloud, in her heart she whispered, "And you remind me of my son when he still remembered to care." Meanwhile, her own children remained distant. Emily sent an email once. "Mom, hope you're doing well. Things are crazy here. Let's plan a visit soon." But soon never came. Paul sent a check for her birthday instead of a call. Sarah didn't respond at all. Margaret read their messages again and again, trying to believe they meant more than they did. On nights when loneliness crept in, she sat at the kitchen table writing letters she'd never send. Letters full of forgiveness, love, and small details of her days. She'd fold them neatly and place them in a drawer labeled someday. Then came the day her heart betrayed her. It was early spring. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains as she tried to reach the top shelf for her teapot. A sharp pain shot through her chest, and she fell against the counter, gasping. The world blurred, colors melting into white noise. When she opened her eyes again, she was in a hospital bed, machines beeping softly. Eli was there, sitting by her side, his head bowed in worry. "You scared me, Grandma M," he said, voice trembling. "You have no idea how scared." She smiled weakly, touched his hand and whispered, "Thank you for being here." For 2 days he barely left her side. Her children? None of them came. The hospital had called, but each one gave the same answer. "We'll try to make it next week." When she was discharged, Eli took her home, cleaned her house, cooked soup, and even changed the light bulb in the hallway. "You don't have to do all this," she told him softly. He shrugged. "You looked after everyone your whole life. Let someone look after you now." For the first time in years, she cried. Not from sadness, but from being seen. Summer arrived with golden evenings and the scent of lilacs in the air. Margaret began sitting on her porch again, a small knitted blanket over her knees, watching neighbors pass by. Eli would often join her after work, and they'd talk until the sky turned violet. Sometimes he brought his guitar, playing softly while she hummed along. Word spread through the neighborhood about the boy and the old woman who laughed together every evening. People smiled when they passed, warmed by the unlikely friendship. Then one morning in late August, Eli knocked but there was no answer. He tried again the next day, still nothing. On the third day he called the local caretaker, who helped unlock the door. Margaret was in her favorite chair by the window, her teacup empty beside her, her hands resting peacefully on her lap. She looked as though she had simply fallen asleep watching the sunrise. On the small table beside her was a folded note addressed to "My dear Eli." In it she wrote. The morning light came through the lace curtains in soft golden streaks, settling on the worn edges of my kitchen table. The same one I've sat at for more than 40 years, watching the sun rise and fall on this little piece of land that once felt like the whole world to me. I can still remember when Harold and I first brought it home. Well, not the house exactly, but the dream of it. We were so young then, too poor for fancy things but rich in hope. 2 kids from Kansas who thought love was enough to build a life. And for a while it was. The laughter of our children used to fill these walls. The sound of tiny feet pattering across creaky floorboards. The smell of cinnamon rolls every Sunday morning. It all feels like another lifetime now. A story I once lived but can no longer touch. My hands tremble these days, but not because of age. No, it's the ache of remembering, of knowing I've outlived the moments that made me who I was. That's why I'm writing this letter. The last one I'll ever write, sitting here at this old table with a pen that still smells faintly of Harold's cologne, because he was the last one to use it before he passed. My eyes blur every few seconds, partly from tears, partly from the soft hum of sadness that's become my constant companion since that night they told me I had to leave. "It's for your own good, Grandma," they said, voices too polished, too patient, like they'd practiced those words in the mirror. "You'll be more comfortable at Willow Pines. They'll take great care of you." Willow Pines, such a pretty name for a place where old souls are tucked away to fade quietly. I nodded then, pretending to agree, because I've learned there's no use arguing with youth.